Hey everyone, it's Colin, how's it going? If you want to fill a room with sound, chances are you're going to reach for a Bluetooth speaker. But believe it or not, boomboxes are still being made. And this one is really weird. Other than a big home stereo, boomboxes used to be kind of the default option just for playing music out loud at home. Of course, they've fallen out of favor just because, well, most people are playing music off of their smartphones now, so having a big dedicated device like this doesn't really make sense anymore. But there are still some kind of niche use cases where this form factor makes a lot of sense, and this is a perfect example of that. This particular one is branded GPX, and I'll just let the cat out of the bag right away here. Watch what happens when I turn it on. Yeah, this thing's definitely a little bit different with a 7-inch LCD screen on the front. And that screen makes sense because of this feature. It's got your typical optical drive on top. It'll play audio CDs, of course, but it'll also play DVDs. So it's got some typical transport controls: play, pause, stop, forward, reverse, there's track, skip buttons. To navigate DVD menus, you do need to use the wireless remote control, which unfortunately is missing with this unit. And sure enough, it does indeed play regular DVD movies, although without the remote, you can't change the aspect ratio. By default, it plays everything 16:9. So with 4:3 sources like this, it just stretches them out, and that can get kind of annoying. Outside of the DVD menu and display options though, this thing is actually kind of rudimentary in terms of its controls. There's no tone controls other than just like a bass boost on-off switch. And a lot of the stuff on here feels very manual. It's almost like they took a boombox and then just tacked a DVD player into it. But there's some odd sophistication to this thing as well. You can toggle between playing DVDs or playing files off of a USB flash drive plugged into the USB port in the front. So I am curious about the capabilities of that USB port, just what kinds of files can it play? Unfortunately, GPX sucks at having any sort of documentation about its products on its website. It doesn't host the owner's manuals or anything. And I can't even find the manual for this model generally anywhere else on the internet. I guess nobody ever archived it. It probably just came as a printed thing in the box. So I've got a USB flash drive with a few different kinds of files on it. I've got 2 different video files, as well as an MP3 and a WAV audio file. So let's plug this thing in and just see what shows up. So it looks like you go into a screen where it separates them out, pictures versus music, and so this is just the root directory. It's only showing the MP3. It's not showing the WAV file. That's kind of interesting. Unfortunately, I don't think there's really a way... Yeah, you can't... Without the remote, you can't navigate that menu. I wanted to see what was in the picture side of things, but I suspect that other option was limited just to still photos and probably not videos. Even if it could play video files, given the age of this device, it probably would limit you to like really old codecs or something along those lines. Like you would have to jump through hoops to convert modern videos down to some format that this thing wants to play, and I don't think most people would want to bother doing that. And what really surprised me is the output connections on this. Yeah, you might expect a regular composite video out, but there's also coaxial and optical digital audio out. You can hook this thing up to a surround sound receiver if you want to. Even kind of further along those lines, if you wanted to use this like as your home DVD player, you totally could because of this switch, which if you flip it, turns off the screen on the front. You can still operate all the controls, but I guess that's just to keep it from being distracting if you have this thing hooked up to the rest of like your home AV setup. Now that's neat and all, but this thing actually wasn't meant to be your home DVD player. Instead, this gives it away. A pair of microphone inputs with a separate mic volume wheel. Yeah, this thing, if you hadn't guessed already, is actually a home karaoke device, like an all-in-one kind of unit. And if you don't believe me, the label on the bottom totally gives it away. They even call it a karaoke party machine. This one dates back to July of 2010, but you can still buy similar products even today. And while I'm sure the DVD playing feature was well used by the people who bought this unit, what I'm sure got used even more are these karaoke discs that include the graphics. And this unit, even though it doesn't really say so on any of the labeling, will absolutely play them too. And of course, then that means the screen can show the lyrics in time with the music. Now, this thing doesn't sound spectacular by any means. It's a fairly cheap looking and honestly sounding boombox, but I'll give you a quick audio sample. I do have to be careful as to which track I play because I don't want to deal with content match, but there's one on this disc that we should be able to sneak by with. So no, it doesn't sound amazing, and honestly, it doesn't really even get particularly loud, but that's not this thing's purpose. This isn't meant to be some like big bar karaoke kind of setup. This is just meant for casual use at home. Just have a few friends over and sing along or whatever. And while I'm not super into that scene like at all, I believe there were also karaoke discs that were pressed on DVDs, maybe that have full motion video or something like that to go with it. So having this thing play not just the CD graphic discs, but also DVDs can make some sense. If you know more about that scene, be sure to comment down below so we can all kind of learn from it. But what I also find really interesting and kind of amusing about this device is how simultaneously modern and old school it is. Here's what I mean. This thing has a DVD player and a screen, but it relies a lot on physical controls otherwise. Physical volume knob, physical push buttons. The bass boost is like a latching on-off sort of thing. And even the mode select is a physical switch that goes between the different modes. You would expect out of a piece of technology like this from just, a decade or so ago, that there would be a lot more soft touch controls. It'd be a lot more like computerized these days. But this thing isn't, and it gets even weirder. This thing has a radio tuner built into it, but it's completely analog. You've got an old school tuning dial, and even the mode select switch for it goes between AM, FM, and FM stereo. It won't even automatically lock onto a stereo signal as you're trying to tune in a station. You have to tell it you want it to be in that mode. And I think it's that dichotomy between modern technology and old school features and use that makes this thing really interesting. It's on loan to me from my friends over at Free Geek Twin Cities, and when this thing showed up, I'm told that lots of people gravitated towards it just because it was so weird looking. How often do you find something that looks like a boombox from the mid-90s with an LCD screen in the front where normally you would expect something like a cassette deck and a USB port and a pair of microphone inputs? That they made devices just like this as recently as 2010, and even some newer models. There's another one that GPX sold that had a similar form factor but a flip up screen, and GPX wasn't even the only manufacturer of these. I found them for sale by another company called Naxa, and no doubt they're being churned out by various other OEMs based out of China and just having different brands slapped on the top. These are a completely weird separate market segment that unless you're really into something like karaoke, you probably didn't even know existed. What's even crazier on top of all of that you could actually buy these at mainstream retail. This isn't some sort of AliExpress special or anything like that. This exact model was sold by Best Buy for about $100 here in the US, and other models can be bought from similar chains like Walmart. Crazy where technology can take us sometimes, and how the desire for a manufacturer to build something down to a price point can lead you in some really weird directions. This thing, for all intents and purposes, feels like a really cheap, crappy boombox, and in many ways it is. But if you know your market and what they want, and you're trying to build stuff down to a price, you can end up with some really interesting products in the end. Anyway, if you like this one, I'd appreciate a thumbs up, and be sure to subscribe. You can follow me on social media at thisdoesnotcomp, and as always, thanks for watching.